Hello and welcome to Vital Voices Live. I'm Rina Amiri and I'm honored to be your guest host for this special episode. At Vital Voices, we know that leadership looks different around the world, and often it is the voices of women rising up in the face of adversity that leads us forward with the most clarity and courage. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by two such extraordinary voices, two remarkable young Afghan women whose leadership, resilience, and vision are a source of inspiration for so many of us. Shafiqa Khpalwak is a poet, writer, and fierce advocate for women's rights. Through her words and her activism, she has become a powerful voice for freedom and education in Afghanistan, particularly for women and girls. Mahal Wak is a youth leader and social entrepreneur working to build a future where Afghan women can dream freely and live their lives with hope, innovation, and wavering commitment to justice, and to be their essential selves. Both Shafiqa and Mahal are part of a new generation of Afghan women, and I would say they're a continuing generation because what is really important to know is Afghan women have always been fighting for their rights, well before our intervention. And this generation is continuing that struggle and that fight. They refuse to be silenced, and they're helping to shape a narrative that is essential for us to understand that Afghan women are not victims. They're resilient leaders, they're determined, they have a hunger for change, and they are going to lead that change themselves. They're going to tell us how to help them, how to support them, and how to be behind their voices. We all remember August 15, 2021. It is indelibly etched in our memories, particularly those of us who've been working on Afghanistan, who are from Afghanistan. And I think that the world at large that day watched with horror, because there had been such a celebration of watching Afghan women and girls and the extraordinary courage that they showed and the changes that they instituted. I remember talking to people from all over the world, and the Afghan women were a source of inspiration, of hope. And to see the Taliban, the same group who had imprisoned women in their homes, women and girls in the 1990s, who had stripped away the rights of women, girls, and the population at large, return to power was horrifying. For Afghan women and girls in particular, it was harrowing to people who, up until the day before, had dreams, had expectations of what their future would be, to suddenly see their future stripped away by people that they had not voted for, that they had not supported in any way. They had been under the gun of this group, and now this is the group that was taking power. And in the days and weeks that followed, we saw the chaos that unfolded. We all remember the Kabul airport and the thousands of Afghans who had been at the forefront of fighting for democratic change. Journalists, human rights defenders, civil society leaders, just regular citizens suddenly find themselves in a desperate situation, fearing for their lives and just understanding that their life had been wiped away within a day. Over 120,000 people were evacuated in one of the largest airlifts in history, including tens of thousands of women and girls whose lives were at immediate risk. There were kill lists of women and girls, and this is something that suddenly there was an immediate need to try to find a way to help these leaders who had been fighting, who had been at the forefront of fighting for other people's rights, and suddenly they were struggling to try to escape, not because they wanted to leave Afghanistan, but because they had no other choice, because they knew that it not only put them at threat, but their children, their families, their extended families, and their communities. Many of those who were evacuated arrived in the United States under humanitarian parole. This is a temporary status that grants entry, but not permanent protection. Unlike the refugee process, a parole offers no clear pathway to citizenship, no automatic rights to work long-term, and no guarantees of stability. While the Biden administration introduced the Afghan Adjustment Act, a proposed law that would provide a more secure legal status to Afghan parolees, it has yet to be passed by Congress. That leaves tens of thousands of Afghans in limbo, facing uncertain futures and facing tremendous threat. These are people that went through extraordinary hardship to get here, including being in limbo in other countries, and their children faced extraordinary hardship. And now they face tremendous uncertainty about their futures and their children's futures once again. Afghan women and girls in the Afghan population in general are facing an extraordinarily difficult situation. They're facing a level of oppression that is only precedented by the last time that the Taliban were in power. The level of oppression is extreme. Women and girls are denied education beyond the basic primary level. They have access to very limited employment and really restricted sectors. They have very limited freedom of movement. Their safety is under threat. They don't have access to basic health care. Even the right to use their voice, to have their voice heard, is prescribed under law. This situation has been characterized as gender apartheid. And I do believe it is gender apartheid. I don't know what else you would call it. The ICC just issued arrest warrants of Taliban leaders for gender persecution, which I think is an incredibly important step, because it is the world recognizing that this is not an ordinary situation. This is not about culture. It is not about religion. It is a situation of extreme oppression of a population that the world must condemn. Today, we center the voices of Afghan women who continue to lead, resist, and fight for their rights despite unimaginable challenges. Their stories are not just of survival, but of courage and an unyielding demand for justice. Shafiqa Jan, Mahal Jan, thank you for being here with us. You are extraordinarily courageous. You are a source of just tremendous inspiration, not just for Afghans, but for all of us everywhere who are looking for models of courage. Mahal Jan, you were an actress in Afghanistan and performed in several films and television before the Taliban took over. Tell us what your life was like. Tell us more about what your dreams were like, what you thought of what your future would look like.
Rina Jan, thanks for having us tonight. This is such an emotional topic for me, I'll be honest with you. My life before August 15, 2021 was full of hope, passion for my future. As an actress, I was able to perform in films and TV series that told the story of Afghan women. I was able to advocate for them through my art. Times were challenging at the time as well. It wasn't easy, it was hard, but there was space for progress. There was a sense of hope for a better future. And Afghan women were building dreams. They were not fearing survival.
Thank you. Can you walk us, you describe a life, I think that many people in the US can connect to. This is the life that we take for granted. And we think that tomorrow is going to be a continuation of, even if it's filled with disappointments, but of potential and possibility. All of that was taken away from you on August 15th. Can you walk us through? I want the world to understand what you went through. Tell us what went through your mind and what that day was like for you when you realized that your future was gone and that you had to leave Afghanistan.
Yeah. I remember every moment, every second of the day that Kabul fell. I thought the sky collapsed. I was looking at my suitcase and unsure what to pack, because how do you pack your life in a suitcase? Like, all of a sudden, your family, your work, your friends, it all glimpsed like a question mark to me. Like, I didn't know. I was in a complete shock. And I was terrifying. I didn't know if I was going to be alive until the end of the night or not. And I know, as well as me, all the Afghan women who dared to speak up for their life, to live freely, they were also fearing for their life as well. And that day, I thought I'm not just an actress. I became a refugee all of a sudden. I lost everything. Like, I lost my identity, and I didn't know where to look to find myself anymore.
Oh, it's tremendously painful. And Afghans have gone through this generation after generation. And we have one of the highest refugee populations in the world. And this is a story that is happening over and over again to people. And the pain behind those stories, I think it's very important for people to understand that people don't choose to leave their countries.
For sure.
Yeah. Shafiqa Jan, you are one of Afghanistan's modern poets, and you've used your poetry to advocate for women and girls. You were also forced to leave Afghanistan shortly after the fall of Kabul. Tell me what that has been like for you. I want you to go to wherever you want to go and what you want the world to understand about your situation.
Thank you, Rina Jan, and thank you for having us. I think it is one of the most difficult topics to speak about, honestly, because it's still not. I still think that it's some kind of like nightmare, and I might wake up and nothing might have been like what we have been through. Like, what the first feeling that comes to, I would say, since I'm a poet and it's all about feelings, it's betrayal. You feel betrayed, you feel humiliated, you feel abandoned, and it's so horrible. But I think we came from the same generation, Mahal and I. We grew up in that 20 years when the international community was engaged in Afghanistan, and it was not a rose garden per se, but then there were things that were happening that we thought we might have a brighter future, or at least that was promised. That promise was made to us. I remember my sister, my youngest sister, Wajma, she's now 17 years old. There was, when she was 50, she was 12 years old, I think, there was a bomb blast in front of her school. She was stuck in that bomb blast, and then when she came home, she was frightened, she was crying. And within an hour, she had her notebooks opened, her books opened, and she was doing her homework. This is how our lives was. Like, our life was like that. You didn't know like whether you would come home alive or not. But then at the end of the day, especially like for our generation, we thought that this is not gonna be the future. It's gonna be much, much better. Not the way it turned out to be. This was not in our wildest dream. We couldn't imagine that. I remember before the collapse of Kabul, a day before that, I went with a friend, with some friends, to a restaurant in Kabul, and we were sitting there, and they were telling me like, okay, if you're gonna leave the country, where would you want to go? And I'm like, why would I want to leave my country? I don't want to go. I applied for Fulbright in 2020. And then I was telling them that I applied for Fulbright and I'm shortlisted, and hopefully I will get it, and then I will do my master's degree and I will come back. And they're like, no, it will not be like that. It was, I still cannot accept what happened. No one in my family had a passport, like a proper passport to go. Nobody in my family ever imagined that one day they will be in another country and in some way, like, you see, I don't know what is with this world, but suddenly when your status change, everything around you change. But at the same time, so it is also a protest. This was the only protest that we could do, to leave the environment that we didn't choose and we didn't want to live in, whether that environment was our own home. We left our home not by choice, but we were forced to do, and it was at the same time a protest that we did. And you say, like, generations of Afghans, and generation of Afghans are protesting that, protesting oppression in that way. One of my professors, actually, he wrote on that time a very beautiful article about, like, Afghans becoming, leaving the country it's some sort of civil disobedience, because you cannot do anything else. What I can do is, like, I can leave this place. And it has happened throughout history, like many other people have done that. So whether it's for the Taliban or the world, the message that it gives is that we didn't choose this environment and we don't want to live in that circumstances. So what is the choice that we have? We cannot change it right now. It's beyond our abilities. But what we can do, we can leave it. It was one of the hardest decisions to leave. And I sometimes I regret that. Honestly, I feel guilty. So it's a guilt of survival that you go through, especially when you look back to Afghanistan, that the way girls are living there, the women that they live there, my own families, they cannot go to school. I cannot imagine my life without school, without university. When I go here to college, when I go to a library, when I do my homeworks, and I like, why I can have this and not millions of others cannot have it? What is their fault? If you're born a woman, it's, I don't know. So it's sometimes a guilt of survival, still trying to cope with this and trying to heal and trying to understand and make peace with myself. I will be honest, I haven't yet made peace with myself for leaving.
So many people in your situation, you know, as we've said, this is generations of people being forced to leave their homeland. My own family went through it, and the sense of survival guilt is tremendous. The sense of choice, it's interesting that you put it that way, because there is a sense of, there was a safety concern. So choice, I think there was an element of choice that was taken away because of the fact that you were under threat. But there's still a sense of, where's my agency in this? And you're putting an important point on what you're bringing out of that, which is dissent, resistance, and you're using your voice. You continue to use your voice, as so many Afghan women are doing, to give voice to those that remain voiceless in Afghanistan. And so you continue your work. Mahal Jan, you're in Utah. And in Utah, you've also continued your activism, and a context in which I imagine there's very little understanding of the world that you came from. And what is it that you find important to convey? What are the challenges in trying to explain the situation of Afghans in your context? How challenging has that been for you? Tell us some of your stories.
So living in the United States, and especially living in Utah, it's been both challenging and humbling. As you know, where I came from, I had a voice, I had a career that I built for myself, but then in one day, it was all gone. And so where I came, I was a complete stranger. Nobody knew anything about me, and I had to rebuild my life from zero. And that's been the most challenging part, because when you come to a new country, you don't know the language, you don't know the system, you don't know the culture. So you have to deal with all of that, and also the trauma that we've been gone through. In the meantime, we had to find ourselves too. We had to work on ourselves. We had to improve ourselves, because we were the people that women or children are looking for, that we can be their voice. So that time, I took time to actually work on myself and to grow more, to learn more, and use whatever platform I could, international platforms, to advocate for women and children in Afghanistan that has been forced to be silenced. And one thing we shouldn't forget, that behind the headlines, there are strong Afghan, brilliant, brave women that they are forced to be silenced.
What are some of the assumptions that you have to dismantle about Afghan women or Afghanistan in your communities? What are some of the things that are difficult to explain but important for people to understand?
To be honest, I think it will take years and years for this country to understand the situation, like a human rights situation in Afghanistan, very basic human rights. Sometimes I don't feel ready to tell people, like in my country, women cannot go to school, they cannot leave home without a man with them. I just can't tell them, but I want them to know, like, there's a part of the world that women have been forgotten. It's very hard for me to even speak about it, but I want people to know that those women are very strong, they're brilliant, they have a voice, and they shouldn't be silenced by force. We have to advocate for them. So there are a lot of things.
Thank you. Shafiqa Jan, we're in an extraordinary place here as well, and people are looking for sources of courage, for models of courage. What can you share about the lessons that you've learned about being courageous, about finding your courage in a context that brings, where there's so much fear? As you said, so many Afghans that I've spoken to, when they left the house, they kissed their family goodbye like it was the last day they were going to see them. And yet they continue to fight on. What are the lessons of courage that you would like to share?
I think one of the things that sometimes you don't have any other choice but to be courageous. It's just to be brave. This is sometimes the only choice you have. And then it's also the like, you feel responsible not for your life but for those who think that you can raise their voice. This is also, and I think a lot of women that I see, Afghan women that are advocating outside of Afghanistan, this is what I kind of like find in their advocacy, is that, okay, they say, like, we left everything we had. There are people out there in our country who cannot raise their voice, and I have here an opportunity to do that, then I should do it. And at the end of the day, I think it is very important that it's hope. If you don't have hope, I don't think you can ever be brave or courageous. For one to have strength and braveness, it is to have hope. And I personally have not lost hope in Afghanistan and in a better world for everyone around the world. This is important, and also it's like, what is my job as a human being? So I'm a poet and she's an actress, and we come from a kind of like an artistic background, and people would say, like, why do you speak about politics? It's like, what does it have to do with you? You're a poet, just write your poetry. But then sometimes you're not only a poet, you're not only an actress, you're not only, like, you guys, when you were coming together to evacuate women in Afghanistan, like, what did it have to do with you? Like, I mean, like, it was not only like that. So sometimes you are in situation that you are beyond just simply who you are, and you have to stand up for that, especially when the world is not very much in a positive circumstances, even when there is a lot of negativity around. Even that one good speech, positive speech, can make a difference. And if I'm always asking this question, I'm always telling my sisters and my friends, and I'm saying, like, if we don't do that, then who will do it? I know it's very hard. It's not easy, and it's we are paying the price in many different kind of like ways. Probably sometimes you cannot even explain it to people, but I think it is the responsibility, and it's also we have to do it. I don't think we don't have any other choice. We have to do that. We have to speak out.
There's a really wonderful quote that I often keep in mind, that courage is not about not being fearful, but that something becomes more important than fear.
Exactly. And it's not becoming your fears as well. Like right now, we were speaking about that. Like, there's different kinds of fears. We are afraid of whether my speech is gonna be taken out of context and misused in social media. We are afraid in the West. We are afraid from the Taliban. Even sometimes within our own families, that even if I'm saying something, is that gonna offend my mother, my grandma, my father, my husband? So it's not that you will not be afraid. I am afraid. I'm constantly afraid, and I'm always afraid, and I'm sure that every other woman is. But then it's also about making the choice that whether I want to be afraid and cornered and silenced, or whether I want to speak up even when I'm afraid. I think for us, it's necessary to make the second one. You have to speak up even when you are afraid.
A really important point. Mahal John, you grew up in an Afghanistan that is extraordinarily different from the Afghanistan today. It was difficult even then, and many parts of the country, it was still a place where there weren't many opportunities, but there was legislation, although it wasn't implemented in many places. But there was a hope. There was as you noted, the currency of hope is absolutely vital to a sense of agency and to building a future. And what is so heartbreaking in the conversations that I've had with and that I continue to have with Afghan women and girls inside the country is the struggle to hold on to hope. And they know that hope is their oxygen. Mm-hmm. What are some of the things that is important for us to do to engender that hope for those inside the country that are facing enormous challenges and are unable to use their voice in the way that they want to?
Good question, Rina Jan. I think so. There's a problem and there's a solution for it, and we need people for that solution right now, because where we have problem, the problem is the women of Afghanistan, that they're held without their without what they want. They're erased from public eye. They have been tortured. They have been murdered. But they still whispers their hope to us, because we're people that came from Afghanistan and we have connection. We know what's going on in Afghanistan. We have family in Afghanistan. My sisters has been banned from school, so it's very personal to me. And so the solution is, when they are whispering their hopes to us, we have to be their voice. We have to advocate for them. We all, not just the women, they can come together. We can do so much for Afghan women until they're free, until they can speak up for themselves. We can be their voice through advocating for them.
Okay, so what would you want? I'm going to turn to you. What would you want our audience to know in terms of how they do that? when we talk about advocacy, when we talk about taking their voices and creating hope, what does that mean? What are some concrete things that you can talk about that should be done?
I think for one, the world should understand and realize that it is not the problem, only the problem of Afghan women. It is not a domestic problem in Afghanistan. It is a concern that everyone across the world should have. If it can happen in Afghanistan, it can happen anywhere. And if it is normalized in Afghanistan, it can be normalized anywhere. That is the first thing, I think. And the second thing is that sometimes we think that the small things that we do, or maybe I am not in politics, I don't have access to a lot of resources, so I cannot make a difference. But at the end of the day, like, using the very limited resources that everyone in today's world is in some way have access to, that can make a huge difference. Using the contacts, the networks that you have, advocating for women, and especially in the West, when it's a lot of democracies we see. You have members in parliament, you have Congress. There's a lot of ways that you can reach out to those policymakers and those who are implementing those policies and ask about that. So it's, I think if the world rally around Afghan women, this fight would be a lot easier. We're already fighting this fight. It's not that we want the world to fight our fight for us. We do that, but it's only that we need support. We need them to amplify this voice. And whether you have a media channel, you have social media, you have a Congress member, you have, I don't know, working in an NGO or in UN, wherever you are. It is just like the situation in Afghanistan right now should not be normalized, because it is not normal, as you've said this in your introduction. And it should not be, in a way, kind of like, as culture and religion and circumstances should not be used as a pretext for that. I know people are playing with those words, but we have seen Afghanistan, and the world have seen Afghanistan before 2021 and even before 1996. So it's the story of Afghan women did not start in 2001. We actually, Afghanistan was. Women in Afghanistan had the right to vote before United States. So we had the most modern Islamic law in the history of Islamic countries. In 20th century, Afghanistan was the first country, Islamic country, that was independent. And the laws that were created during that time were Islamic laws, but they were very modern. And every right of a woman was protected in those laws. So it's not something that suddenly happened in 2001, or it's not something that suddenly was taken in 2021. If the Taliban, for example, like now, they ban girls from going to school, but there are families, thousands of them, providing informal education for their daughters. So they're finding those ways to do that. And it's also important for, one thing I would say is that every little opportunity that you can contribute to, whether it is like sponsoring a girl for education, donating to an NGO that is already working on that, donating to another organization, or asking your countries to provide, for example, scholarships, fellowships, or something, whatever it is, there are a lot of things that can be done, and that requires little efforts. But yes, of course, when a lot of people do it, then it will make a difference.
You bring up a really important point, which is what is happening in Afghanistan has implications everywhere. You know, people are not just looking at the Taliban to condemn. There are those that are looking to emulate. And, you know, when I was with the UN, I traveled I worked in Somalia and Nigeria and other contexts, and there were hardline elements that were looking very closely at what the Taliban had done in the 1990s and what was happening in Afghanistan. So how the world responds to Afghanistan is sending a signal. I also want to come back to what you noted about education. You know, I've had such heartbreaking discussions with Afghan girls. One mother actually told me about her daughter, who she was in such pain over having lost the ability to go to school. She would sit in front of the mirror every day and bring out her little notebook, and she would pretend that she was in school. And she was telling me the story to convey the desperation and the hunger there was for school, whether it be underground schools or any opportunity. Mahal Jan, can you talk about what you're hearing, the stories that you're hearing about Afghan girls and their mothers, their families, and what they're doing to try to get access to education and the challenges they're facing?
As you said, Afghan girls, they have lost hopes now to go to school, but they're trying, they're like in survival mode. They're trying to be hopeful for the future. They're trying to find ways to educate themselves by themselves, all alone. Or maybe sometimes their family, their dad or mom can help them. But that story is the story of all the girls of Afghanistan. One thing that comes to my mind is that I know world see Afghan women as a victim, but I want to point out that Afghan women are not only victims, they're leaders, they're teachers, they're doctors. They're much more than what world sees them. It's unfortunate that the situation in Afghanistan is like this now. I hope it wasn't like that. But I just want to say that girl that is actually educating herself in front of the mirror, that's brilliant. Afghan women, they can do so much. They're doing it inside their four walls of home. So just imagine how much more they can do once they have a voice, once they have a power, once they're educated, once they have the help that they need to speak up for themselves.
Thank you. I'm going to turn to the same question for you.
So we started together a campaign with Rawadari, another Afghan organization, and we call this campaign Iqra. When 1,000 days of...
Explain what Iqra means.
Iqra is a verse in the Quran. It means read. And it was, if I'm not mistaken, the first verse of Quran that was spoken to Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And when we started this campaign, we reached out to girls who were banned from school in 34 provinces in Afghanistan, and we collected their stories. They're in audio. We hide their names, and those stories that we would listen they were so tragic, but at the same time extremely, extremely hopeful and full of wisdom. I remember there was this one girl from Uruzgan, which is the birthplace of the Taliban's leader, and it is one of the very less progressed and developed province in Afghanistan. So this girl, she was speaking like, for how long they're going to be in power and for how long they're going to keep it like that. History has shown us that those who are oppressing others are not going to stay for a longer period. And if they think they can erase my voice, they are mistaken, because I am half of the life that they live, and what they're gonna do with their lives if I'm not there. There are thousands of those stories that we collected. There is this one girl, her name is Diwa, and Diwa actually means a candle in Pashto. And she was in grade 8 when her school was closed. She's now writing her memoir of school days, and she's writing letters to her classmates that she has not met for 4 years. And and my own sister, and as I've spoke about her earlier, her classmate is now married, and she was 17, 18 years old by now. She was in grade 8 when her school was closed, and then she's now married. And There are those stories that you hear that families don't have any other choice but to marry their daughters. And then there are stories that you hear that despite all the odds, they're finding ways to keep their spirit and to keep their creativity in some way, whether it's by writing, whether it's by painting, or just speaking, or just dreaming. Sometimes, like, just dreaming is resistance. Sometimes just having hope is resistance. It's not that you will change the world. They can't do that. And we have seen, like, hundreds and tens of these girls came out on street in provinces like Paktia. The girl whose school was banned, the door was closed, and they protested in the city of Gardez. Who would have imagined, like in Paktia, like tens of girls are coming on the street? They're teenage girls. A lot of the protesters that we see in Afghanistan, they're teenage girls. They're not old women or women who have a lot of kind of experience of advocacy, who would know what protests mean. Like these were very 14, 15 years old girls that they would come out and protest. And a lot of families are now leaving Afghanistan to get education for their daughters. And what we see, like in our neighboring countries, like in Pakistan and Iran, that they're now deporting a lot of Afghans back. But what will happen to the future of these, especially these young girls who are coming back to the country? So there is a lot of, Afghanistan has always been the country of paradoxes. You cannot see black and white there. And you cannot only say, as Mahal Jan said, that, okay, Afghan women are always whining. They're always complaining. There are ways that they're finding those ways to do something for themselves and for their daughters. So my mother-in-law, she was in grade 6 when the civil war broke in Afghanistan. And now my sister-in-law, she turned 14 years old, and it's been 2 years since she's at home. My mother-in-law couldn't, she was not able to continue her education, and now my sister-in-law is going through the same thing, and it's extremely difficult for our family. We don't even have the courage to speak with each other like what we should do. But when I speak with Asma, my sister-in-law, she's like, when her school was, she finished grade 6, and the first thing she told me, like, I'm not concerned that I will never get education, but my only concern is that I will lose interest in education, because those girls who left before me, now when I speak with them, they're no longer interested in school. And it's extremely difficult, but I see her now since it's 2 years. She's home. She's learning English, she's learning drawing, and then she's thinking to become a psychiatrist or psychologist. So yes, there's this, I don't know where I heard this, that you can tell me not to speak, but you can never take away the power of dreaming from me. So you can never take away that from us. No power can do that.
That's very beautiful. I had a letter from a young girl from Afghanistan who said the same thing. She said, they can take away my school, they can take away the right to work, but they can't take away my dreams, and they can't take away my hunger, and therefore they cannot take away my future. I also hear a lot from fathers, and fathers who say, I don't want to leave my country. Doctors, I don't want to leave my people, but if my daughters don't get an education, I have to leave. And they're saying this not because of some lofty reason, but because they know that education is key to being able to put food on the table. They know that putting food on the table is key to having a future for themselves, for their family, for their community, and that their daughters are part of that essential future. And those that want less refugees in Afghanistan, this is what this is the way to support a country that where people don't want to leave. They're being forced to leave because of these extreme policies. I wish I had another hour to talk to you both, because I think there's so much that we can learn from you. I'm so grateful to both of you, Shafiqa Jan, Mahal Jan, for sharing your just powerful stories, your vision, your unwavering commitment to the future of Afghanistan, and your extraordinary courage and determination. Your voices remind us that even in the face of unimaginable challenges, there's courage and there's endurance that you and so many young women are demonstrating. And it's vital, not just for Afghanistan, it's vital for the world to see this courage in action. Thank you for joining us on Vital Voices. I'm Rina Amiri, and until next time, stay engaged, stay inspired, and keep lifting the voices of those essential voices that need to be heard. Thanks
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.